And welcome to Cult Movie Cult, where we watch and discuss the horrific, the obscure, and the flat-out strange from the other side of cinema. I'm Mark Dickerson.
And I'm Jeremy Fink. And this is the third installment in our series After the Bomb, Sci-Fi Movies of the 1950s. Today we'll be discussing 1958's Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, directed by Nathan Hers.
Hey, what's going on here?
Harry! Sounds like someone calling your name.
Harry! Harry!
It's your wife. She's wrecking the town looking for you. Come on, I gotta get you out of here.
No! She's me out there, she'll kill me. She's crazy.
Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, directed by Nathan Hers, follows the story of a woman named Nancy Archer who comes across a strange glowing sphere in the desert, and nobody believes her. Her husband Harry, who is only after her money and is having an affair with another woman, uses her outrageous claims to try to prove that she's crazy, so she'll be sent away to a sanitarium. His plan, however, backfires when, through a second contact with the glowing sphere, she is suddenly turned into a giant and goes out to get her revenge.
Yeah, this was a fun one, Jeremy. First time I saw this one. You had seen this one before, though, right?
Yeah, I've seen this one a good handful of times, actually. It's definitely a favorite of mine from that era.
Yeah,
Really,
I can see why.
Yeah, really a wild ride. A short
very short
length for a feature film. I think the runtime
Yes.
is 65 minutes or something.
Yes.
Close to that. So
Uh-huh.
really concise. You kind of get in and you get out, and it's pretty crazy the entire time.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. So this was made, I guess, to piggyback off of the success of similarly themed films such as The Amazing Colossal Man and Incredible Shrinking Man, both from 1957, so the year before this. And this was, I guess, made in that vein because when you first see this film, at least I thought, why did they make this? Like, what made them think? What even gave them the idea?
Yeah.
I mean, it's genius, but how did they come up with it, in Hollywood where there's not many original ideas?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then I was looking into it, and it made sense when I realized that, yes, there were other films around this time that were very successful, and they had to do with either growing or shrinking, I guess, of the main character. So this made sense in a certain way, and this is more of like a exploitation film almost. It kind of has that vibe to it.
Yeah,
right?
This film for me, it really feels like a kind of strange blend of genres. The thing that kept popping into my mind, have you ever seen the film Kiss Me Deadly? It's a 40s film, but it's a film noir film that is actually.
Oh yeah, I have seen that.
Kiss Me Deadly is from 1955. So actually, not 40s. Apologies. It's a 1955 film noir film directed by Robert Aldrich, and it's a really wonderful film.
That's the one. That's the one with the crazy ending, right?
Yeah,
Am I
crazy
thinking-
ending. This film
Okay.
has been referenced in David Lynch's films. He's referenced this particularly in Lost Highway. That movie references Kiss Me Deadly a lot. And Martin Scorsese is also on the record as Kiss Me Deadly was also referenced in Pulp Fiction, across the board. And I could really kind of feel the influence of Kiss Me Deadly and just the film noir genre in general on Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, which feels really kind of different than some of these other 50s sci-fi movies we've watched so far. Particularly, there's one plot line in this movie that's all about this husband, as we mentioned, Harry Archer, and his floozy, quote-unquote, girlfriend, Honey Parker.
Honey.
Yeah, Honey, which is the ultimate, middle 20th century floozy character name.
Floozy. Yeah.
Floozy and Honey, they just go together.
Yeah.
Like peanut butter and jelly.
They might as well have called her Floozy.
They might as well have just called her Floozy Parker or
Yeah.
Floozy Honey, which is another interesting name. But kind of that subplot and kind of the conniving and the wheeling and dealing, and everyone has something else going on. Our main character, Nancy has this kind of dark past as an alcoholic. Like this film just has this really kind of film noir pessimistic worldview.
Yeah, it's a little more melodrama too, I noted.
So much melodrama.
Yeah.
So much melodrama. Going back, as we mentioned, David Lynch before, I think that it's almost, I can't say for certain, but just knowing his work, I would say with almost certainty that this film had some kind of influence on him, particularly in like Twin Peaks. Just this insane, just every second is melodrama and more melodrama.
Yeah. It is.
Just nonstop, but it's so campy.
Very campy. Definitely the campiest film that we watched so far in the series, I would say. So just to go through the basic beats of the film. So first of all, I do want to say great opening titles so far in all these films.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And all these movies.
A study unto themselves.
Yes, they are phenomenal. They really get you right into the action. Just very exciting, kind of jumping out of the screen at you, and all kind of, pretty different, I would say. Like Godzilla had that more ominous tone, and then, and them in this one were more kind of in your face. So, so the film begins with, I thought it was a giant floating egg at first, but apparently it's a spacecraft, which they call a satellite in the movie. I guess this was the time of Sputnik, so satellites were on the mind and kind of a fascination for many people. And so the woman's driving down the road, who is the main character, and that's Nancy, played by Allison Hayes. And she's driving down the road. She's kind of in the desert, I guess, similar to the last film, the beginning of that one. And driving down the road, and she sees this giant floating spherical spacecraft. And from there, we just see a giant hand come from off screen, and it reaches out for her as she's screaming. And so she's able to get away from that. And she goes to the police, and they think that she is drunk and hysterical. And, well, she is a little hysterical because she just saw a 50-foot tall alien. Or I guess they kind of go back and forth. Do they actually ever say 50 foot? I believe they say 30 foot a lot in the movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it might have been an advertising thing that 50 foot sounded more impressive than 30 foot.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I guess they say 30 foot in the movie. But anyway, a very tall alien. And they don't show the alien other than the hand at this moment. And so essentially everyone thinks that Nancy's crazy. And meanwhile, she is suspicious of her husband, Harry, and rightfully so, because he is messing around with that floozy Honey Parker, played by Yvette Vickers. And they just, they chew the scenery. I mean, everyone does in this movie, but particularly the two lovers, I would say. Every scene with them was just like them scheming and thinking about how they can get away with their what they want to do. And like you mentioned, they do want to have Nancy committed to an insane asylum so that they can get all of her money. She apparently is very wealthy, or comes from a family that's very wealthy.
I believe the number they used is $50 million is what.
Wow.
Which for 1958 is quite a stat.
Even now that's
a lot. But
whew, okay.
Yeah.
So there's that plot going on, a little bit of a subplot, which I guess main plot as well. It's a pretty big part of the movie. And then eventually the husband drives her back out to where she first saw this satellite, quote unquote. And at first they don't see anything, and then they finally do see it. And, she's shouting like, "It's real, I'm not crazy, it's a satellite." Plenty of lines like that in this movie. And then the giant reaches out for her again, and we actually see him this time. We see his face, and it is I guess a 30-foot tall bald man is the alien, is the space giant is how he's listed. In some
type of medieval, church garb. Which is an interesting choice.
It made me think of like ancient Greece or something, or Roman or something like that. Yeah, just the way he's dressed is very bizarre. Everything about it is very bizarre. So that's very strange. Eventually they get to the point where even after Harry has seen this, he still has his, he wants to have her committed. He still wants to go through with his plan. And so they have doctors come to the house, and they need to inject her with medicine. And of course they overhear, I believe Honey overhears the doctor talking about how an overdose would be fatal, if they injected her with too much medicine. So of course she's in the background listening to this, and she goes to tell Harry, and that's their plan. They want to try to inject her and I guess have her overdose. At this point, I guess they just want her out of the picture, right? Yeah. So the husband goes in, attempts to inject her, and he sees the giant hand again. They really love that prop. They use that prop a lot in this movie. Yeah. And there's the screaming nurse, and that's a great scene when. So this we should mention, this is how far into the movie? Probably around 50-minute mark.
Between 45 and 50 minutes in.
Right.
With an hour and 5-minute long movie.
With a lean hour and 5 minutes, around the 50-minute mark is actually a little bit after that is when Nancy finally becomes the 50-foot woman or 30-foot woman because of Now this is all due to radiation, I guess, from the spacecraft, right? Am I correct in assuming that they don't really go into it too much?
They mention it's radiation, and at one point there's a scene where there's a man walking around in the desert with some kind of device, searching for uranium, complaining that you can't just look for gold anymore. And I think that they're implying that maybe it had something to do with uranium, but it's not exactly clear.
All right. So there's some kind of radiation that's causing her to grow. And even after she's grown into a giant, they chain her up, I guess, essentially in the bedroom. So she's still in the bedroom at this point. And there's one scene which I found very funny. So a policeman that's at the house finds some footprints, very large footprints, which implies that somehow a giant moseyed on by and without anyone noticing. There's no sound of anything. He's just like, I think he actually says like, "Hey, look, there's another one." Like as they're tracking the footprints, like, "Oh, and another one," you know. And eventually they stumble upon a spacecraft, and that's the first time we see. Now, is this a different spacecraft, or is this supposed to be like the same one?
I believe it's the same one.
Okay, same one.
Yeah.
So it's the big spherical egg one.
The spherical egg. Yeah.
And then the big bald man alien person thing hologram. He kind of looked like a hologram.
Yeah, I think the hologram was more a result of the effects at the time.
Oh, okay.
I think it was just I think they used some type of overlay, and there was some type of transparency required to put the images together. But I could be wrong. Maybe they wanted the hologram look.
Yeah, that kind of threw me off. But anyway, he's there, and he lifts the car, smash it, and then he teleports away through some kind of portal, I guess, that opens up. And then finally, Nancy breaks loose of her chains and stomps out of the house. And I'm not sure how she did that either.
Yep.
Again, I was like, did I miss something? Or I love that this movie just doesn't explain things like that.
They don't have time.
Now she's just out of the house.
She's out of the house. Yeah.
Yeah, she's on her own. She's going out, and she's that has that iconic moment where she screams, "He's with that woman!" And she goes after her husband, and we finally see her. We finally see Nancy in all her glory as a giant, and this again is not till we've gone past the 50-minute mark. Of a 65-minute movie, do we see this? And so up until now, like I said, they really made use of that hand prop, the giant hand and arm that kind of come in and out of the frame, and they actually use it again at this moment. It's kind of a King Kong moment here because her hand goes through the window, kind of searching for a husband through different houses and things like that, and eventually she gets to the bar where her husband and his lover are in the bar, and the husband grabs a pistol from the police officer and shoots at her, and but she's able to grab him and she takes him away. And if the movie was fun before, Jeremy, I thought it was really fun at this point. I mean, this was like what you've been waiting for. She's out rampaging the streets, and the only thing is I wish it lasted longer. I mean, I know this is a short movie, and I do appreciate how it kind of gets in and out, but this part, obviously you just kind of want more of this. But
that's what everybody shows up for. What I was just thinking about is how fascinating it would have been if this movie wasn't called Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, and if you had no idea that that's what it was going to turn into. What an insane ride. I mean, it's already an insane ride, but if you're just sitting there watching this movie and then 50 minutes in, all of a sudden, what was... obviously she comes across the alien thing in the desert, but like all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, she just turns into a... That would be a really, really shocking thing.
Well, like you said, it was a very attention-getting title.
Yeah,
Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. It's a great title
and poster. But we'll get to the poster in a bit. But
great poster, yeah. So you can't fault them for that. But I agree. I think if you had gone 50 minutes into this movie and that hadn't happened yet, when it did happen, you'd be very shocked. Yeah. But because the movie is called that, you are anticipating it.
You're waiting.
Time. So, and also real quick, the scene in the bar where she reaches in and grabs her husband. I love the police officer in that scene. He's almost like I forget his name from that show, Andy Griffith's show.
Yeah.
He's just feebly firing his pistol at her, and it's done so meekly or poorly acted, I'm not sure, that it made me actually laugh out loud in that part when he was doing it. But anyway, so eventually she goes into... Now she walks into power lines, I believe.
Yeah.
Or they're firing at her.
It seemed like there was some kind of combination of them firing at her and the power lines, and maybe they hit the power lines, but there's some type of explosion.
Yeah. And she's taken down to the ground, and that's where she passes away. She dies. And there's that last scene, which is very much, it must have been either an homage to King Kong or, ripping it off, either one.
Yeah.
But it's, they have that last line where the police are looking at her, and one of them says, she finally got Harry all to herself.
To herself, yep.
And it's just a kind of like down note that they end on. It is sort of a tragedy.
Oh, yeah. Well, and
much
that's
like
why
King Kong.
I really think this is a film noir movie, ultimately.
A little bit,
It just has this sci-fi element.
It has that kind of dark element to
But
it.
really, like, the kind of overall tone is much less sci-fi. Like, they don't really spend... we've looked at a couple other films, both Godzilla and Them, and both of those films really spend time getting into the science and the details. You understand that there's some kind of moral dilemma about the science about the science that's involved, and they're really looking at the problems and solutions that science present in the world. Whereas this film, it's really just about people screwing each other over. It's really just about relationships. It's about people getting pissed off and wanting revenge. It's much more thematically, it's much more in the film noir vein than it is in which is what I think I like so much about it, because at least personally, the sci-fi movies that the thing that I kind of generally like the least in the sci-fi genre is that kind of explanation of things, the huge amounts of exposition, all that. I tend to be much more drawn to character-driven stories, and what I like so much about this one is that it really is, even though it's so melodramatic and it's just funny as hell for reasons it probably wasn't meant to be funny at all times. Certain things were definitely meant to be funny, but it wasn't meant to be funny across the board, maybe as much as it was. I don't think this is one of those movies that's so bad it's good. I think that there are some really genuinely like cool moments, some really fun moments.
Well, like we said, it's certainly the campiest film that we've seen so far in the series. And there was a lot of melodrama and cheesy dialogue. It actually seemed like it was made for MST3K. Mystery Science Theater 3000, that kind of movie that they would just eat up and have all kind of insults for. But yeah, like you said, Jeremy, there's lots of different elements to the movie, which I appreciated as well. There's sort of that crime element, which I guess goes along with the noir. There's also like I said, the exploitation angle, where it kind of feels like Revenge of the Scorned Woman kind of film, which is kind of like almost its own subgenre. But there's a little bit of that as well. And did you think the movie played with gender roles or anything like that? Do you think it was being cheeky, or do you think it was playing into that kind of thing? Or
I think looking at it now, we can see it that way. But I'm not one to state the intention of a writer or director. Of course, anyone who worked on it. My guess would be that probably wasn't the goal. It was probably, as you were just saying, more in this vein of exploitation. I mean, the fact that when she becomes this giant woman, all of a sudden, even though she's been wearing relatively normal clothing for the time period, as soon as she becomes this giant woman, I mean, maybe I guess that, like, she became giant and someone she just quickly wrapped herself in bed sheets or something like that. But it seemed kind of more likely that just she was giant and there was something kind of erotic and wacky about it. So my guess would be that the intention wasn't necessarily something that was, feminist, or even though that probably wouldn't have been.
But I also don't think it was malicious either. I feel like
no.
Yeah, like it was very playful. The whole
there was respect for it, and it was self-aware enough, I think. But it is interesting, kind of looking at it from this 21st century, in a kind of feminist critique, to look at this film, because there are some things in it that are kind of subversive for the era. Obviously, there are a lot of things that are not. Going back to this Floozy character, I think she was very in line with the kind of very stereotypical portrayal of the femme fatale, except not quite as clever and not quite as, she was just literally basically there to be a sex pot and drive this guy to do things that he shouldn't be doing. But something about the fact that there was this woman our main character, Nancy, it's like, she's a woman who in the 1950s nobody would listen to, which is, women experience that now, so I'm sure in the 1950s it was even worse. And the fact that, like, she is allowed in this movie to get pissed off about it and to try to exact her revenge, even if there is this thing where, she's only after love, You know, she just wanted love, but there's definitely a lot of anger there too, which I do think, even if it wasn't necessarily an intentional thing, it is kind of subversive and interesting for that era.
She has a pretty dark edge.
Yeah.
Like she has like an alcoholic past and things like that, which I thought was interesting as well. So yeah, there's a little bit of that, and yeah, I wasn't looking for a definitive answer. I was just curious. It actually just came to mind now, just because we had talked a little bit in them about how there was some subversion of those kind of things, but also playing into it a little bit. So, because these movies, again, are of their time, as all of these movies are. And I did want to talk about the director really quickly, because I found this interesting. So first of all, this movie was shot in 8 days for $89,000.
Unbelievable.
Which was $10,000 under budget, apparently.
Yeah.
So this, yeah, kudos to them. And the director, so Nathan, is he credited as...
He's credited as Nathan Hertz.
Nathan Hertz, okay. So his real name is Nathan, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but Juran, Juran.
Juran, yeah.
Yeah, Juran.
Probably Juran.
Probably Juran, yeah. And so he was billed as Nathan Hertz, and although... So Duran is his middle name, I guess. And apparently this was because he was embarrassed by this film's low budget and poor quality, and the fact that it was a quote-unquote monster movie. I believe he showed up on set not really, I guess, grasping the full weight of what, or not knowing the whole story, I guess, before he came on set, which is... I think fairly common back then. It was a little bit more like director for hire kind of atmosphere. So directors would kind of just show up, and when he was told what he was shooting, he was. I saw some stories that said he was pretty livid and pretty. He almost like wouldn't come out of his trailer and stuff like that. And I found an interesting quote from him when I was looking into his biography a little bit, and I think this kind of sums him up. So let me just read this quote real quick. So. He says, "I approached the picture business as a business. I always did pictures for the money and for the creative challenges. I wasn't a born director. I was just a technician who could transfer the script from the page to the stage and could get it shot on schedule and on budget. I never became caught up in the romance of the movies," which I found pretty candid, And that was in 1989. He said that apparently for a science fiction fan magazine.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty candid about it. So it's not like he was putting on airs or anything like that, because obviously this film, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, went on to become such an iconic cult film, such a huge sci-fi movie.
Although that is interesting coming from him, because it's like one of those things where in this particular movie he wasn't happy with the result, so he didn't take his name off of it. He didn't do the Alan Smithy thing that some directors do, but he did change his name, which is a strange thing, because if he's someone who views himself as a technician, maybe he views this as failed craftsmanship or something like that. But there was clearly some emotion if he was angry enough or disappointed enough, I don't know. I'm not to say not to contradict him. He has his own opinions of his work and how he approaches it. But I don't know. I just think that's an interesting kind of combination of philosophy and action.
Yeah, or even as approaching this film as a special effects movie. Yeah. Even looking at it in that way, it was pretty, I wouldn't say revolutionary or anything like that. I mean, there had been movies that were similar to this around this time or before this, but, seen as a challenge, and he did talk about how he enjoyed a challenge, so maybe he looked at it that way.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, he did, I guess, change his name or change his credit in the film.
Yeah.
But speaking of the effects, Jeremy, what did you think of the effects in this film compared to the other films in the series? Do you think they were more or less effective or about the same?
I think that they were hit or miss in this film. I think that there were certain moments that were really, really not the best. That where, like, even as we mentioned before, the first time we see this giant guy, he's kind of transparent, and I don't think he was really supposed to be. And there were moments with Nancy, once she's giant, where she's kind of transparent. Although I personally actually really like the effect strictly on a kind of like, I don't know if impressionist is the word, but like something about the image and the looseness of it. And this kind of strange glow was really, really attractive, but not necessarily in terms of the verisimilitude. It didn't make me think that it was more real. I just enjoyed the aesthetic. But then I think the moments that were really strong were when they used miniatures with this giant woman. And what was so cool about this is, and I don't know if it's just a gender thing, because the monster, quote unquote, was just a human woman. and not quite as stiff as like, you look at some of these other movies where they have a man as like the giant or the creature or something like that, and there's something that feels really stiff. Or even compared to the giant man we see in this movie, he still feels like this kind of sci-fi character. But the fact that when she was giant, there was still a lot of real like personality and flair to her.
Definitely.
Especially with these miniatures, and she just looks so big and hulking.
Yeah.
But also there was this like kind of sadness to her face, but also this kind of like sexed up exploitation quality, which felt really kind of strange and interesting for a special effect, because I feel like special effects so often can be kind of cold. It's like it can express what it needs to express, but it kind of can suck the emotion out. And I think that what was so cool with this is when the effect was done well, all the emotion was still there.
Yeah, in this case, I would say that the acting is what makes it work in a way. Allison Hayes, the actress who played her, she's kind of what your eye just goes to her, not only because she's a giant, but because her acting. I thought somehow when she was a giant, her acting was even better. Like, it just you really felt for her as this kind of tragic figure by the end of the movie. And she'd been tragic throughout, but up until but even when she is hulking over everyone, she still has to. She still has challenges. She's still fired upon, and she has the power lines to contend with. And so you never really have a moment where you're not really feeling for this woman. And I thought the actress Allison Hayes did a great job with that.
Yeah.
And she's melodramatic as well. But I think everyone was on the same page with this movie. And really quickly, just to piggyback what you said about the effects, Jeremy. Yeah, I agree. I think it's pretty hit or miss, and I think. As great as some of the effects are, I think they could have went a little bit further. You can kind of tell it was a little bit phoned in, maybe from the director.
Also, very, very low budget, much lower than either of the other movies we've looked at.
Because when I first began the movie, I guess I thought there would be a lot more like, forced perspective type shots and interesting trickery, camera trickery and things with the sets and miniatures and things like that. And there is a little bit of that, but not too much. There's not many effect shots at all up until the final moments of the film. You do, like we said, they do make use of that giant hand prop, which we do see a lot, which, it's economical. And like we said, they were under budget, so good for them. And it does add to the kitsch of the whole movie. So there's that. But I guess from a special effects standpoint, I was a bit disappointed in that regard.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the giant ants we saw in them, and obviously Godzilla was amazing.
Yeah, Godzilla's
those miniatures. Yeah, that's a whole nother level. But the movie we're going to talk about after this, I was very impressed with the effects, but we'll get to that later. So yeah, this film, bit of a letdown in that department, but still great fun to watch. Very exciting, and it has your attention the whole time, all through those 65 minutes, I would say. And real quick, I just wanted to mention two other quick things. The poster for this movie, which you brought up, Jeremy, or otherwise known as like the, I guess the advertisement for the film, very interesting. It was designed by Roger Corman, and it's also in the Museum of Modern Art, apparently, as in their permanent collection. And it really is a great poster. It's very iconic, for this kind of movie, and for, I would say, cult film in general. Just that her on that cover, the image is nothing like what we see in the movie, but it's something. It's really a great representation of everything, and they did a great job with that. Roger Corman did, apparently. And other than that, the last thing I wanted to mention, now when I first saw this movie, oddly enough, I thought of this, and I didn't know why, because I didn't remember watching it, but apparently there was a made-for-TV remake made in 1993.
Yep.
And I guess I had seen this movie because when I was pulling up clips of it, I was like, wow, I remember this. And so it was somewhere in my subconscious, and it starred Daryl Hannah and one of the Baldwin brothers. I forget which one. And one of the lesser known Baldwin brothers. And I was fascinated by the fact that it was directed by Christopher Guest, which I either forgot or... Yeah, but it kind of makes sense because it very much goes for the camp angle. It wears it on its sleeve. I would say I watched a couple clips, and it was exactly how I remembered it, just over the top, campy, maybe even more than the original that we're talking about. It just
Yeah.
really goes for it. And I could see Christopher Guest just behind the camera, just kind of snickering to himself and giggling, because this was obviously before he was a big name and things like that. So, well, I guess he was sort of he was, relatively,
Yeah.
well, he was well known, I
well
guess,
known,
at the
but-
time, but he hadn't really gotten into his niche yet, or his niche, sorry, yet,
Mm-hmm.
with, his type of mockumentary films. So I guess this was kind of like a, director for hire type thing for him. And in a certain way, in the campy, very comedic tone, it kind of does make sense. So I just found that kind of interesting. But that was all I really had to say. I mean, it's a short movie, and I didn't have too many notes, but I really had a good time with it. Really glad I saw it finally. I've always wanted to watch it. And I was also reminded of another movie we talked about, Jeremy, towards the end of Dude, Where's My Car? There's a,
Yeah,
I feel like an homage.
that was one
to
thing
this
I wanted
movie,
to bring
right?
up. Yeah, so in Dude, Where's My Car? There's definitely an homage to this film. They take it in a slightly different direction. They lean into exploitation angle a little bit harder than this one even does.
But clearly inspired by this.
But clearly inspired by it. And there's a certain there's a certain thrill about this concept. I know I was looking at the Wikipedia page for this, just seeing some of the references, and I apparently like Johnny Bravo references at one point. The cartoon show Archie's Weird Mysteries, based on the Archie comic books, referenced it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This something about this movie has really stuck with people. It might be the poster, as weird as that is to say.
I'm sure it's a big part of it.
Yeah,
sure.
I know this poster was in. Because I remember the first time I heard about this movie was I watched Pulp Fiction, and I saw the poster was in the background during that
Yeah.
really famous restaurant scene with
Right.
Uma Thurman and John Travolta. And so that was kind of the first time I was introduced to this movie. But there's just something about this one that just kind of seems to stick with people. Like once you don't even have to have seen it, you just kind of feel like you know about it.
And I think part of that is because it is a woman
Yeah.
that is a giant. You don't usually see that in these types of films. So I think it was so different, and it wasn't done too much after this.
Yeah.
So that people kind of have that iconic image in their mind, and also just the camp overall. I'm sure it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an endlessly imitated film, an idea that you see show up in a lot of different things, and I think it's just one of those ideas that's just very fun and handled in a fun way.
Yeah.
Very dramatic, but melodramatic.
Yeah.
So that's
and referenced right up to today, a few months ago. If anyone is looking for something kind of quick and fun to watch, I know the artist and musical artist Lana Del Rey actually came out with a music video this past year, which is pretty much a direct homage to this film and the drive-in movie experience.
Oh, really?
So whether or
That's
not
cool.
you're into her music or not, the music video is just awesome. So would highly
Cool.
recommend going to 3 or 4
Yeah.
minutes long. Recommend going to check that out for sure.
So even up until today.
Up until today, it still is constantly being referenced and looked at.
And I'm sure there will be a remake
At some point. At some point.
reboot, whatever you want to call it.
For all of the budding filmmakers out there, if you get the chance, maybe take it. Who knows?
Yeah. Hey, I mean, you could do a lot with this.
Yeah.
The fact that she's only a giant in the film for such a short amount of time, I'm sure you could take that and just kind of run with it. Which, again, the made-for-TV remake in the 90s did a bit of that, and I think she's a giant for most of that movie.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much all I had to say about this one. It's just a quick, fun one. The one next week that we're going to talk about is pretty quick as well. But did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with this movie, Jeremy?
No, I think that about.
I know you
sums it
said
up.
it's one of your favorites.
Yeah,
of
well,
this
one of my
genre,
favorites
so-
of this genre and this time period. It's just such a great it'd be a great movie night movie. If you have some friends you want to hang out with, maybe
Yeah.
you want to do like a double feature or something like that, because this
Yeah.
movie is so quick and short.
Oh,
it'd be a
this
great
must have
one.
been made for
Yeah.
drive-in double features. I'm sure.
Yeah, be a great one to watch with a group of people for sure.
Yeah, it's a fun time. And so now I just wanted to close out by saying a couple different things. For the next part of the series, we're going to be talking about Fiend Without a Face. And like I said, the special effects in that one, just phenomenal, which I was totally taken aback by because I thought there would just be invisible the entire time. But definitely check out that one if you want to watch along with us and hear our discussion on the next part of the series. And I also wanted to mention that we have a new graphic a new illustration for Cult Movie Cult that you can find on our various social media sites and as the main icon of our podcast. And that was done by Elaine Collins Hasford. And you can find her on Instagram at Truly Truman Art or at her own website, which is www.trulytruman.com. And she did a phenomenal job with that graphic, and I'm really impressed with it. It's sort of a collage of different movies, different cult films that we've talked about, some not yet, but probably we will eventually, and different iconic characters and moments and things like that. So it's really cool, but I'm sure you'll see it if you're listening to this. So definitely check that out and check her out as well. All right, so that's going to do it for Cult Movie Cult. Thank you for listening, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you have any cult films you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, or if you'd like to officially join the cult, be a guest on the show, please feel free to reach out to us at cultmoviecult@gmail.com. This has been Cult Movie Cult, and until next time, so long from the other side.